and welcome to the Embroidered Elephant channel. My name is Kim and today I am going to be going through some more books that I have read this year. In case you haven't seen any of my videos before, I am currently on a journey to finish as many of my books on my bookshelf as I possibly can this year. And with each of the books that I am finishing, I am crocheting a granny square to represent their covers. So as part of this, obviously I am covering the crocheting side of things in separate videos, and I also thought it would be a nice idea to go over the books that I'm reading as well. So I've got a few separate videos where I've gone over the first 20 books that I've read so far, and this is going to be a video where I go over books 21 to 30. So the layout of this video will be, I will talk about each of the books that I've read. I will go over what I rated them out of 5, my thoughts on them, the basic synopsis of the book, and how long it took me to read them. And I will also show you the book cover alongside the crochet granny square that I made for them as well. So here is the first book. So book 21 was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Gramus. I started this book on the 27th of February and I finished it on the 12th of March. And this was a book that I listened to via audiobook. So the book was quite famous, I want to say a couple of years ago. It's a book about the character Elizabeth Zott. It's set in the early 1960s and it is about Elizabeth and her role in the scientific community. She's very clever and she makes quite a lot of advancements. She's very precise in what she does. However, she is held back quite a lot due to her gender, being female at the time. Throughout the book, she gets into a relationship with another scientist, and this makes it a bit difficult as well. A lot of her advancements are pushed towards her husband. She is very keen to progress naturally, as she should do, rather than be held up by her husband's status in the research facility that she is in. Throughout the book, there are various different issues. You find out quite a lot about Elizabeth and her backstory, and a little bit more about sort of her life, her husband's life, and sort of the progress through that. It was quite a good book. Eventually she starts a cooking show because it pays quite well and it's a job, and she incorporates a lot of science into the cooking show, and it's just really interesting to again see the progress throughout, with her trying to be quite true to herself throughout the process. I think naturally she's not very interested in being a TV celebrity or a cooking celebrity or anything like that. So it's how she navigates the different challenges whilst being true to herself, which makes the book quite interesting. So the book itself, personally, I don't think it was worth the hype. It was good. The ending was fair. The things that went on throughout the book were, again, fairly interesting. I wouldn't say that it was anything special. Again, not personally worth the hype. I gave this book 3.5 stars. So it was mid-range, it was okay. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because there wasn't enough happening for me to devour the book or for me to particularly recommend it. But yeah, it says a lot about, there's a lot of themes about sexism and how women were viewed in the 1960s. Some things have changed, some things are just more subtle nowadays, so it's it gives a nice viewpoint on sexism during the 1960s, is the best I can say. So the book cover was this, and this is the square that I crocheted to go alongside it. Fairly colourful. So the next book that I finished, book number 22, was Restless by William Boyd. My dad had bought this for me a few years ago and I just didn't get around to reading it, unfortunately. And again, I listened to this book for free on YouTube. It was read out by someone. It wasn't a very long book. I think it was about 2 or 3 hours off the top of my head. The book itself was about Eva Delektorskaya, is her actual name. She was a World War II spy, and she gets sort of towards the end of her life and she decides that she wants to talk to someone about it, and she decides to speak to her daughter about it. Her daughter is named Ruth, and Eva sends a lot of letters home with Ruth to go through and to read, so that Eva can sort of release the information and talk to her. Obviously, a lot of the information is confidential, but Eva wants to tell her daughter about her life, about the life story, and about the work that she did within World War II and the spy work that she did. The story itself is it goes between being fast-paced when she is talking about the work that she did, and being a bit slower case when it goes back to Ruth and what she's doing and how she's feeling about it, and the questions that she has about her mum and for her mum. So the book itself is fairly good. Again, for me, the ending is just... I don't know how the book could have ended so that it would be better, but the ending was a little bit anticlimactic. It just sort of came to an end and that was it, which I found a little bit of a shame. I started the book I started it on the 12th of March and I finished it on the 13th of March, so really, really quick, and I gave it 2 stars. Again, the book was good. It was nothing special and it was just very anticlimactic in the end. I can't even remember how it ended. It was just sort of, it felt as though he just kind of stopped writing, if that makes sense. And yes, the book had some interesting turns in it. I don't want to spoil too much by giving away the details of it, but it had some interesting turns, and Eva turned out to be quite a good person, as we were expecting, but there was nothing that sort of made the book stand out. So yeah, this is the book cover that I had, and this was the crochet square that I made for it. Book number 23 is Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. So I started this book on the 13th of March and I finished it on the 13th of March as well, so very quick. I hired this book through my library audiobook service. So they give you 3 weeks to finish an audiobook that you hire. And it's a free service being run through the library, which is great. So Tess of the D'Urbervilles is quite a famous book. Obviously Thomas Hardy is quite well known as well. My dad recommended that I read it, but I hadn't up until this point. So it is a 19th century novel. It is based on Tess, and it is quite a negative book. So Tess has a difficult childhood, and she doesn't grow up in a particularly rich family. Her mum has an idea on how to bring some money into the family. It's by Tess going and speaking to a potential family member about getting some money. there she meets her cousin and he proposes, they get married. So there's lots of things that happen. There are lots of delicate themes, I would say. Poor Tess never seems to catch a break. There is a sexual assault. She has a child from the assault, and then it's how she sort of deals with that, how the story continues, and how she sort of makes the best of a very tough situation. Obviously, if they're not very well off financially before she has a child, after she has a child it will be much more difficult. So it was a really quick book to get through. It was very, very negative. I felt very sorry for Tess, and I wouldn't say that I felt particularly positive after reading the book, because it was just difficulty after difficulty. She never seemed to catch a break, and the ending was not positive either. So yes, the book itself did keep me entertained, again because I wasn't expecting all of the disappointments to happen. I kept waiting for her to have something good happen, which didn't really. Sorry for the spoilers. Nothing good particularly happened, so that kept me listening, but it was a little bit gutting. So this was the front cover of the book that I used as inspiration, and this is the crochet square that I made from it. The next book that I finished was called Broken and Betrayed. It was book 24, and it was by Jane Senior. So I read this book from the 14th to the 23rd of March, and I gave it 4.5 stars. So Jane Senior is fairly well known. She was connected to the Rotherham grooming gang. She was one of the workers who found out about it very early, and she did a lot of research and a lot of detective work to sort of try and get it shut down very early. This book is mainly about sort of the professional side of things, so Jane's experience with trying to get this information to the police and trying to get them to take action. She's involved in a lot of the, I don't know if policy makers is the right word, the people who were responsible for her funding. She worked in the public sector, I think. I can't remember exactly what her role is. I don't believe that she was a sexual health worker as she's been portrayed in different versions of this story. I believe that she worked in like a charity to support these children and try to get them to understand that they were being groomed and that they were very vulnerable, get them to see the grooming gangs as they were and help them safely escape the clutches of them, I guess, is the best way of saying it. But yes, as I said, it was very much the story of the administration side of things. So again, very gutting. She would write big reports. She would collate a lot of information. Her and her team would do a lot of research, speaking to these young girls and putting all the information together, making, you know, maps of how these people are connected, addresses, so much information that was factual. And many times she took it to the police or to different agencies who had the ability to do something, social workers as well, and they were very unwilling to take it further and to investigate more so. And the reason mostly, or the speculated reason for that, is because the grooming gangs were of a particular race, so most of them were Asian men, and it was seen as very racist to state this, although it was very factual. And her point was, if there was a sex offender who had shown up at a school, you would put out a physical description of them. So white male with brown hair, green eyes, you know, bigger built, wearing XYZ clothing. You would give details, whereas she was very much pushed into not giving out details, and specifically not talking about their race or their looks, because again, it was seen as quite delicate and it will be seen as racist. But her perspective, and I completely agree, a fact is a fact. It's not being racist, it's saying that they were of a certain ethnicity because they were. And because this was seen as a race issue and they didn't want to rock the boat or to segregate anyone, which I understand why you would want to do that. In this case, I would say unnecessary, but again, I wasn't there. Because of this issue being raised, they weren't able to protect the children that could have been protected, and a lot of these assaults and the ongoing grooming and sexual exploitation of these young girls could have been prevented, but unfortunately it wasn't, and it continued for a while. This book was really interesting. As a professional who works with victims of sexual assault, it was very, very interesting. And it was, again, quite a gutting read, because there was many opportunities where it could have been prevented, or if they'd have been willing to listen or take on board the research that she'd been doing and the investigation, if they'd have been willing to actually do what they said that they would do in preventing the grooming from continuing and putting more safety nets in place, it could have saved a lot of children and young people a lot of pain and suffering. So as a professional, it was very interesting to read. I would say that there are quite a lot of explicit details in there of child abuse, so if that's something that you're quite sensitive to, I would recommend not reading it. But yeah, I would recommend a lot of my colleagues read the book, because again, I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from the book by Jane. So very, very much recommended if it's a subject that interests you. This was the book cover, and this was the crochet square that I made from it. Book number 25 was I Will Not Be Erased by Gal-Dem. Again, I was lucky enough to be able to hire this from my library. I started this on the 20th of March and I finished it on the 22nd. I gave it 4.5 stars. The book is a collection of 14 stories by people of Black and minority ethnic groups. So each story is based on things such as diary entries from when they were much younger, about their struggles of growing up in England from a minority ethnic background. And as a white British person, I found it very enlightening to read these stories and hear about the struggles that they had with just really simple things, going to school, university, you know, a lot of things that I would maybe take for granted or wouldn't stick out as much when I went to school as it would for someone with a minority ethnic background. And it really made me think and reflect on my experiences and how other people experience things as well. With a lot of these stories, there was also a response to the diary entry from the person as they are now, responding to their younger selves, giving themselves advice. It was really, I would really recommend it, because it opens your eyes to backgrounds that you may not be necessarily aware of, or you may not have a lot of experience of. And I think that it's always very enlightening to listen to the experiences of other people and learn from them. The book itself, as I said, I listened to the audiobook version, and a lot of the stories were read out by their authors, which was just so great, and it added an extra layer to it. It just made it so much more involved to listen to. But the book itself is quite slim, and I believe it is quite easy to get through. If I could have had an ideal world, I probably would have separated out the story, so read one at a time, so that I could really absorb and think more about the stories that were in there. But I really enjoyed the way that I got through it as well, which was just I listened to it whilst I was walking into town, so I had a nice experience of that, and that brings back quite a lot of memories of the different stories I was listening to and where I was when I heard them. So yeah, it's very much recommended. It's not necessarily an easy read, because there are some things that are quite difficult to hear, just of different experiences, but I would recommend it. And this is the book cover, which is very bright and very beautiful, and this was the square that I made to go alongside it. Book number 26. Oh my gosh. Sunrise on the Reaping by Susane Collins. Again, I was so lucky with this book because I went onto my library app the day that it was released, and they just happened to have the audiobook version on there. And because no one was aware of it, I didn't know that that would be happening. I just so happened to hire it. I was the first person to hire it. So I had a lot of other books on the go at the same time, which made me very much... My brain was taken on a lot, and I did feel quite stressed about the amount of books that I had to finish within 3 weeks. It was a real sort of push to get all of them done before they expired. But I'm so glad that I hired Sunrise on the Reaping, because it was really good. So I read it between the 23rd and the 26th of March, and I rated it 5 stars. So for anyone who hasn't read it, it is about the 50th Hunger Games, which they call the Second Quarter Quell, and it is the story of Haymitch. So if you've watched the Hunger Games movies, Haymitch is the blonde man. He drinks a lot of alcohol, and he is one of the only people, if not the only person, I can't 100% remember, I'm sorry. He's one of the only people, if not the only person, in Sector 12 who has survived the Hunger Games, and he's the only winner. And it's the story of him when he was chosen. So because this book is set before Katniss and Peter go into the Hunger Games, it's 25 years, or 24 and 25 years before Haymitch won the Hunger Games. The arena is completely different, and it's really interesting to hear about all of the other winners and how some of the other people won, and his experience when he goes to the capital, how they make impressions, and how he wins the games. And then it talks us a little bit about his return to home and the heartbreak of losing his competitors, some of which obviously he's made very good friends with. So I absolutely devoured the book because it was just so interesting, and there was always sort of a little bit of a cliffhanger on the end of each of the chapters that made me just want to read more. And it did take me 3 days to get through it, but I'm surprised that I made it last that long, because it was just so good and so readable as well. And I know a lot of other people who have got very good thoughts on the book. Very, very much recommend. It explains a lot about how Haymitch is when he's with Katniss and Peter. It explains a lot about his character, and it's just, I absolutely loved it. It was great. It was so good, in fact, that I actually bought the physical book after I finished the audiobook, because I just needed to have it with me so that when I decide to reread it, I've got it there. one thing that I would love to do is read all of the books in order. So start with, I think it's the Ballad of Songbirds. Start with that, then read Sunrise on the Reaping, and then go through the Hunger Games. Because again, I think you would just have so much more of a background about each of the characters and about the games and President Snow, and yeah, just explain so much really. So yeah, that was great. This is the book cover, and this was the crochet square that I ended up with. Book number 27 was a change again. So this was another book that I had in my to be read pile. However, I also hired the audiobook version, so I got through this quite quickly. So the book is Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and it is by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. So I read this book between the 26th and the 31st of March. The story is a very interesting concept. So it is set in a cafe in Tokyo, and there are certain rules that allow you to go back in time. So very briefly, there's a certain chair that you can sit in at the cafe where you can go back in time and have a conversation with someone else who has been to the cafe, from the past or technically from the future. However, you need to finish your coffee before it gets cold. Otherwise, there's obviously consequences. So there's 4 separate stories set in the cafe. So you've got the same sort of cafe workers there, and you learn a bit about their background. But you have 4 separate stories in this book. So for example, some of the stories were a mother and her daughter. There was one that involves a stranger that you sort of learn a bit more about in the story. And there is another one of a husband and his wife. The husband and his wife was my favourite story. It actually made me cry because it was a little bit emotional, but in the nicest way. And it's, as I said, it's a very interesting concept. The writing style itself, I found it quite difficult to get on with. It was a very slow paced book, and I think you were meant to savour the words, the writing, so that it was less fast paced. I personally struggled with getting through it because there wasn't always a lot happening. There was quite a few different characters, and there wasn't enough happening for me to sort of stay interested. The main reason that I finished the book is because so many people had said how good it was. It was recommendations. I bought the physical book and I was listening to the audiobook as well, so I thought at least if I get through the book I will be able to mark it as complete and sell it as well. So it wasn't terrible, but it didn't keep my interest and it wasn't great. I wouldn't really recommend it, to be honest, myself. I even listened to the book on 1.25 speed just so that it would be a bit quicker. And again, I still felt it dragged on a little bit. I didn't miss anything by having it read out faster. So that was good in a way, I guess. But yeah, as I said, nothing against the author. It just wasn't what I was expecting. I get on better with books where something is always happening and it keeps my interest, and it's quite easy to get through. But this one was just a lot slower. So I gave this book, I said 3 stars, but I would be tempted to give it 2 stars because, as I said, it just really wasn't for me. I made the mistake of buying another of the books before I'd finished, or before I read the first one. So that is a book that I will also be reading, which I'm not looking forward to, but I will read it because I bought it specifically. Book number 28, another quite well-known one, How to Kill Your Family by Bella Mackey. So I got this book from a local free book exchange a year or 2 ago. We recently went to see a family member, my husband's grandma, and she asked if I'd read the book. I said no, and she gave it to me and said, you read this book and tell me if it's worth reading. I again listened to the audiobook version because the writing in the book was very small and I think I would have struggled to get through it. I started it on the 31st of March and I finished it on the 4th of April, and I gave it 3.5 stars. So the story is about Grace. She kills her family, imagine that. So there is a bit of a background as to why she wants to kill her family. So long story short, she grew up with her mum, who was a single mum. She was very good to her and she had a bit of a difficult upbringing. However, she took it very personally when she found out who her dad was, because he was very well off, and if he had supported her and her mum throughout her childhood, she would have had a very different childhood, and her mum would have been better off as well and wouldn't have had to have done some quite difficult work to make ends meet. So she would have had an entirely different childhood. So Grace didn't necessarily want to get involved with her dad, but she wanted to take revenge. And the way that she does this is to kill all of the members of her dad's family and eventually end up killing the dad. The way in which she kills each of the members is very, very inventive, and it's very well thought about, and it's very scheming. Some of them are quite gory, but she worked very hard to kill each of the members of her family, so for me, it kept my interest. And the interesting part about the book is that it's written by Grace while she's in prison, and it's not until towards the end of the book that you actually find out why she's in prison. It was a really good book. It kept my interest. It was quite quick paced, not too quick paced. There was things happening quite a lot, and you were very intrigued to get to the next chapter to work out what happened, why she's in jail, you know, what went wrong. The ending of the book was really unfortunate. I think that for me it was quite gutting for Grace. I won't go into it, but I found it quite gutting for her because she'd put a lot of work in and then obviously something didn't quite go to plan. However, being the devil's advocate, I struggled to find a different way that the book could have been wrapped up so easily and so well. I struggled to see or find what that ending would have been that tied everything together. So I think it sort of was needed, but it was difficult as well. So yeah, very well recommended, but not the best. And this is the book cover, and this was the crochet square that I made from it. Nearly to the end, so book number 29 was Kiss Cut by Karen Slaughter. This was a CD book that I had bought a little while ago, and when I initially started listening to the books, I didn't realise that they were part of a series. So I listened to sort of one of the end books and then one of the middle books, and this was the second book from a series. So I didn't have all of the initial backstory that would have prepared me for this book and each of the characters. You don't necessarily need the backstory to be able to appreciate the story that's going on. The continuation is mainly for the characters. So Karen Slaughter writes a lot of detective books. They are very gory, and from the series I'm reading, it's the Will Trent series, I think. So there's the same sort of characters in there, and their backstories are different, hence why it's a series. But each of the stories, each of the books is on a different investigation. So Kiss Cut starts at an ice rink. Two of the main characters go on a date together. They go to an ice rink, and while she's there, one of the main characters is a GP, a paediatric GP, Whilst they are at the ice rink, she sees one of the young people that she knows quite well, and she seems very, very upset. She goes into the bathroom, and when she comes out, the child had brushed past her and she'd left a trace of blood. So the doctor goes after the young girl to make sure that she's okay, and there is a dispute that takes place between the young girl and her boyfriend at the time. And unfortunately it ends with the young girl being shot because she'd threatened harm to the other young boy. So it was quite a difficult scenario for the police officers involved, for the young girl and for the young boy that was being threatened. So it was very, very difficult. And it is and the story is based on the unfolding of why she was so upset with this boy, why she threatened to kill him, and it's never as simple as it seems. So there was a big crime ring that was uncovered by them, and sort of the key to unlocking all of this is through talking to one young boy, the boy that was threatened, who comes across as very aggressive and not wanting to cooperate with the police. The story itself is quite graphic in details. It features child abuse, sexual abuse, murder, a lot of sort of issues. So there's a lot of warnings before reading this book. The ending was a complete plot twist. I couldn't have seen it coming. At different stages I thought, okay, I know who the main ringleader is, and it wasn't that person, it was someone else. And then again you make assumptions on who the baddie is, and it's not them, it's someone else. So I really liked the twists and the turns. It kept my interest. Again, it's quite gory, so if child abuse, sexual abuse is something that would trigger you, this is definitely not a book for you. But in all, it was a pretty good book. So I rated it 3.5 stars. This was the CD cover, and this was the crochet square that went alongside it. So we are on to the final book of this video. So book number 30 is We Need to Talk by Emily Hunt. So I started this book on the 5th of April and I finished it on the 10th. So again, another fairly quick read. Now, this book is great in concept, and I appreciate that it's someone's individual story, so I'm going to talk about it quite sensitively. The book is about Emily, the author. She went out for dinner with her dad one evening, and throughout the dinner, she feels as though one of her drinks was spiked. Her dad had taken a sip of it, and when he arrived home, Emily's partner or husband at the time had made a comment that he was really out of character and it was very, very unusual for him, and he'd only had one sip. Emily had finished her drink, and when she next came to, it was in a hotel room with someone that she didn't know, and she was naked and obviously very, very disoriented. She had no idea who she was with. She had no idea what happened. Obviously you can make assumptions when, you know, if you wake up in that scenario, you can make assumptions, but you don't have a clear answer as to what has happened. So she spoke to the police about her scenario, and the book is about her progress and her experience with the police and sort of the court systems and the CPS and everything like that. So it's quite in-depth. On one hand, I would say that the book, it has the ability to be really, really helpful. There are a lot of statistics in there that are sort of mind-blowing. They're statistics that I've looked for previously and I haven't been able to come across, so it was really nice to be able to read them and get some facts and hear the ideas that Emily has in, you know, for example, improving the systems and just her experiences. So some of you may or may not know, my job role is working in a sexual assault service. So I support victims of sexual assault to be examined and support them through the process, give them advice, make referrals for them, etc. So I really, really enjoy my job. It's something that I'm obviously very passionate about. The thing that I wasn't a massive fan about with this book was, yes, it was about Emily's experiences, but I personally felt that there were some things in there that were said to be factual that weren't necessarily factual. For example, there were a few times where she made a comment along the lines of, police don't take rape victims seriously. Now, I understand that this was her experience and this may have been how she felt. However, I wouldn't say that that is something that you can necessarily prove, that no police officers take rape cases seriously. And the reason that I took difficulty with this being said was that there are a lot of people reading this book who may or may not have experienced sexual assault. Chances are a lot of people have, so the chances are you've either experienced sexual assault yourself or you know someone else who has, and to the degree that you've experienced that, obviously that's different per person, but a lot of people unfortunately have experienced some sort of sexual assault in their life. With the people that are reading this book, if they're reading very negative things about the police and the sexual assault service and how they don't respect people, how they don't take it seriously, that can potentially and probably would put people off going through the police system and getting in touch with sexual assault services to sort of take this case forwards. It would put a lot of people off potentially getting prosecutions for the assault that's taken place, because we should be able to rely on our police and our justice system. However, reading the book, some of the things that are said are told as truth or factual, or they come across as factual, in which case, again, you know, you won't be taken seriously if you go to the police. I would personally be reading, if I wasn't a professional, if I didn't know much about it, I would be thinking, why would I go to the police? Why would I get it investigated? Because there's no point, they won't take it seriously anyway. That was the main issue that I took with the book, because I feel it would impact future victims or current victims of assault and potentially put them off reporting their crimes. And it's very difficult to change a system that isn't perfect by any means, but it's very difficult to change the statistics and get more convictions if people are less likely to come forward. So although there were good things about her book, a lot of the statistics, a lot of the advice was great, and the sharing of the story was incredibly strong of Emily to do. Just a few instances where it was very negative about the police, I would say that that's not necessarily helpful. Yes, it's her experiences, but not necessarily helpful for other victims in the way that maybe it could have been. But yes, that's my opinion, but I have quite a strong opinion about it, again, mainly based on the work that I do. Anyway, here's the book cover, and here is the crochet square to go alongside. So now that we are at the end of 30 books, I'm currently on book number 38. I've currently finished 38 books. I'm on book 39. So I will be making another of these videos very soon and hopefully having it out. Again, I seem to just be devouring all of the books at the moment. So this is only to the start of April. It's currently, as I'm recording this video, it is the middle of May. So I'm at book 38. By the time it gets to the end of the month, it will be a lot more than that. So what I end up doing in regards to these videos and how I separate them out is something that I will need to think about again, maybe it will be 2 videos a month, so they're a little bit more digestible. But yes, we shall see. If you've got any ideas, please put them below. But thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully you found it interesting to see all of the different books that I've got through and hear my thoughts on each of them. If there is anything in particular that you would like to know about, if you'd like any updates about my book blanket, I will be doing a video soon with a 6-month update, I think. And just showing you what it looks like. It will be beautiful. I'm very biased, but I'm sure that it will be very beautiful, so I can't wait to see all of the squares together because it looks like so much more than it does at the moment. But yes, keep your eyes out for that. So thank you very much for listening to this video. I hope that it has been enjoyable for you. I will speak to you all next weekend on Saturday with another video coming soon. And until next time, take care. And if you can hear the rumbling of my tummy, just ignore it. But yes, thank you for your company.